I'm Brigid Starkey, and I was here a couple weeks ago speaking to you about the course on international negotiation that I'm going to teach in hybrid form. This winter term, let's see where I can put this thing. I don't have many choices here. What I have, let me just finish that thought. So last time I spoke to you about the interactive negotiation simulation that I'm going to use, the online product that I'm hijacking from the University of Maryland College Park. Actually, the students pay for it the way they would pay for a small textbook, $12.50, and they get all the materials and the interactive simulation. So this 3-week course will feature that interactive simulation in the 3rd week as kind of the center piece of the course, and they're going to do an International Whaling Commission simulation that I did show you a bit of last time I was here. Now, the 1st week of the course, I'm going to be presenting them with the theory, okay? And the 2nd week of the course is going to be the case studies, which is what I want to talk about today. I've been brainstorming, a little bit of help from Bob on how to deliver the case study component both synchronously and asynchronously. So what I've come up with here, is that we're going to do 3 cases, and the students are going to be in what I'm calling case study teams. And they're going to work asynchronously to read, well, they'll read the cases individually, of course, since it's hard to read as a team. Read them individually and then work together to post a summary of the case and work together to prepare a presentation of the case. And so I'll get into that in a moment. We're going to use the wiki and basically as the tool by which the summaries will be posted and the presentations will be launched from the wiki, which I'll get into in a moment. The 3 cases that we're going to use to sort of bring the theory alive, because in negotiation there's no better material to look at than a real world case. Ask yourselves, was mediation at all helpful in this case? What kind of actors were at play in this case, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to use the Kyoto climate talks, currently in somewhat of a stalled state, the Korea nuclear talk, currently in somewhat of a stalled state, and the Kashmir conflict, thankfully, currently in something of a stalled state. So the students will be using case study material that they're purchasing for the course. And they'll be, as I said, assigned to a team. The number of students in the class is a little bit fluid at this point. I haven't taught this class winter term before. So it's capped at 25, but I'll be surprised if I have that many students in the winter term. I may add cases if I end up having that many students, so we have more case material to work through. The asynchronous work, as I mentioned a minute ago, the wiki tool is going to enable them to work collaboratively. I'm thinking about this in sort of a group of 4, I think would be ideal, to prepare a summary. As someone who went before me here today mentioned, the main goal is to get them to do the reading for class, especially when the class is as abbreviated as this one. They simply must come to each session of week 2 having thoroughly read and digested the case, and I think that these case study teams will move them along in that direction very nicely. So they'll read, and on the wiki they'll have to work together. I envision spelling this out for them in kind of rubric form about what exactly they have to do. They have to probably divide up the case so that each of them is responsible for a part of it, and then edit it collaboratively so that their summary is ready to go. I'm going to expect it by 10 p.m. the night before the class, maybe earlier. Lately I've been falling asleep by 10 p.m., so I better rethink that now that I think about it. And that will be posted online, and it will allow me to make sure that they have digested it for class time. I've also found that the best way to use multimedia presentations in class is not for me to struggle putting them together. I was just told again by my 14-year-old son last night that I'm a total newbie when it comes to putting things like this together. Oh, Mom, you're hopeless. You don't understand anything. So what I've done is harnessed the capabilities of the students, because they know far more than I do, a good number of them, and they're able to put together really fabulous presentations using the Wiki tool and video clips and interactive maps and all kinds of things that, you know, when I think about the Kashmir case, I think really they could do fantastic things with starting out with interactive maps. And just present the case in that way to their fellow students. And I've been experimenting with that a bit in a class I'm doing this semester on US national security. And they do need kind of pretty set guidelines. One is that I don't want to see text. It's very boring if they just write a bunch of text and then read it to their classmates. So I really emphasize the video clips, the audio, interactive, really kind of jazz it up so that it catches the attention of their fellow students and brings the case or the example to life for their fellow students. So that's the work that they'll be able to do. I mentioned last time that the way I'm conceptualizing this, it's about, in the second week, probably about 1/4 hybrid. And then in the third week with the simulation tool, it goes probably to 75% hybrid, by which I mean the online component is beefed up. But this will be augmented by what we do in our regular classroom, which of course will involve them presenting the case to the class, and we're going to be in a room over in PUP that has multimedia capabilities, so they can bring up their wiki and they can present on the case to their fellow students. And the way I envision this, it's a 3-hour block of time that we're looking at, meeting physically 3 times a week. So I'm thinking that the presentations will really kind of liven things up a bit, break things up for us. And then we'll be able to have a summary discussion of the essential case elements. And also, I think that they should, to some extent, critique each other's presentations. This is important because some students just find, they're obsessed with YouTube, and they find things on YouTube that really don't have a whole lot to do with the case and, take us off in a direction. So I want them to know that they're going to be held accountable for how accurately and how helpfully they presented the case and elements of the case to one another. The kind of organizing framework that we're going to use for their summaries and their analysis is just a game board analogy that the book we're using for the course uses for international negotiation, and it talks about what's the context, what's the board, okay, and then what are the stakes, for example, what are the rules of this game, who are the players, what possible moves can the players make. So if it's a crisis, an ethnic-based crisis, conflict like the Kashmiri conflict, that's very different from the Kyoto climate talks. So they're contrasting, if you will, using a sort of game board analogy. What moves are available, what possible outcomes could there be to this case? So that will, the game board analogy will, in fact, allow for some subdivision of responsibilities on the cases. It'll be plenty, for example, for one or two people to handle who are all the players involved in a case as complex as the Kyoto case. And then we'll be able to get at non-governmental actors and a whole variety of things through that mode. And as I've said a number of times now, the wiki is our main delivery tool there. Assessment of the casework, I am still working. Last time I presented on the simulation, I got some good feedback from you all about a assessment rubric that I need to put together that involves them getting points for participation, points for postings, okay, points based on peer assessments of how they do on their team. You know, obviously free ridership is a big problem, and I have to be able to tap into, did this person, you know, was their quality of participation high? Were they timely with their postings and their participation? Because these are all things that my students complain about, that person X arrived at the 11th hour and threw something together, and you know, I nearly had a heart attack. The girl tells me waiting for him to show up. So all of that's got to be built into how they're going to work together asynchronously and how it's going to be assessed. So sort of the three P's here: participation, which I tap into by virtue of the history on the wiki page; peer reviews, and the presentation. I'm leaning towards sort of a satisfactory versus an unsatisfactory on the group presentations, with unsatisfactory having to redo aspects of it. I kind of shy away from a grade per se sometimes on these types of presentations, because it is hard. The group that goes first, for example, stands to take a big hit on, well, you didn't balance substantive material with kind of flashy material. So I find that satisfactory or unsatisfactory seems to maybe be a better way to go about this in terms of whole group grading, which has some pitfalls and some problems. So that's what I'm thinking, and as Bob and I discussed, I hope that this will have utility in all of my classes, because one of the biggest challenges I do face is getting the students to do the reading carefully and thoroughly before class, so we can base our class discussion on these important cases and readings, which do figure into political science and international relations so heavily. So I'm hoping that this will be, you know, it's a simple idea, certainly in comparison to some of the really interesting things that some of you are doing. But I think it'll have utility across the board for me in just about every class that I teach, if I can figure out how to get them using the Blackboard, specifically the wiki tool, in a really meaningful, collaborative way.
Have you run this by a student?
Yes, I did. I have a student who looked at both of my deliverables, and she's actually in one of my classes now. She likes the idea of assigning specific points for various aspects of participation, because it's I have it running a little bit more loosely this semester, and she, like most of the students who are very conscientious, they're anxious that the less than conscientious get caught up in a dragnet of one sort or another. So points, individual points coming out of the collaborative work, she gave me some good feedback on, as you know, they like to feel that everything is balanced and justice will be served in the end. That's important. Any other questions, thoughts?
You mentioned peers giving feedback. I'm not sure if you're talking within the group. That's certainly one thing which I agree with. I actually just did an assignment getting feedback where students actually have to list 2 of the strengths and the weaknesses of each group member, so that some of that stuff gets teased out, which is helpful to know as I'm reading along.
Right.
The other thing is that I did the same type thing where the students are giving presentations, and of course as the group's up there giving presentations, a lot of the audience is kind of in and out.
Right.
And so that idea that you mentioned of having the other members, I don't know if that's what you're thinking,
yes.
the audience critique.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's
the larger audience.
Right. I don't know if that's going to be part of the grade. It doesn't need to be, but just that involvement might tie them a little bit more.
Right, so they have a responsibility.
Right, and I actually did a little survey in Blackboard that the audience was, was giving them feedback, kind of anonymously to that group.
Right.
So that I kind of felt like it led to a little bit more active, participation from the audience.
Yeah, but, that's an excellent point.
For me, it's always hard. Sometimes I feel like, am I wasting class time by just having them present, and the audience isn't really always paying attention, where I'm the one, paying attention to grade them.
Right, because they're not sure how accountable they're going to be for the presentation, the actual information and the presentation. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. And on the peer review, I do like to do some kind of peer review halfway through. in this abbreviated semester, it'll come up quickly, so that, because it doesn't do anybody a whole lot of good to hear after the fact that there were free riders and other, maybe even bigger, more severe problems. So it's good to tap into those, I think, early on, so adjustments can be made. People can be, you know, told that they either need to shape up or ship out on an abbreviated course like this. So yeah, I think, and I think they like doing the peer reviews online because it does have that added sense of anonymity. Otherwise, they're kind of hiding their paper from the rest of their group who are sitting around the same table. You know, so hopefully do it periodically and be able to nip some problems in the bud.
When I had people do post their writing and have people comment on it on the wiki, one of the questions I asked in a follow-up questionnaire was, you know, did you find this like awful to have to be out in public? And some of them, and it said that initially it was difficult, but that when they realized that everybody else was in the same boat and so forth, and the comments were helpful to them, that overrode their any kind of squeamishness that they might have had about being put forward. It's also important that if it's in public like that, then the peer review comments tend not to be acid or unpleasant. You know, not that they would be anyway. I usually find that they're very careful not to hurt each other's feelings. So it's actually, I think it works to their advantage.
Yeah,
toughens them up.
Yeah, no, that's good. And one of the interesting things is that they tend to gravitate toward their strengths. So people who do very well in orally presenting information will volunteer to do that aspect, be up in front of the class. Others are really good with the technology. They say, I'll tweak this after you guys give me your material. Others are good at writing, so they do some of the narrative work. So they seem to pretty much figure out very quickly what their relative strengths are compared to the others in their group.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.